Hey all, welcome back to the course. All right, this is where we're really going to start getting into the specific skills practice. And we're going to start with this whole notion of mindfulness. It's a notion that's kind of out there in general, but it's also very important to the management of stress. You'll see some little jelly beans on the slide here. I will come back to those jelly beans in just a moment. All right. I want to begin though by just kind of highlighting the following thing about the stress response, and that is that it's an interaction between the body and mind, and it's an interaction that can in fact spiral if we let it, and we often let it. So what I mean by that is, if the amygdala senses threat, it kicks in your sympathetic nervous system, and that produces all the effects I told you about, part of which is this feeling of being energized and active. And it's not a comfortable feeling, and it's a feeling like I should be doing something. And so that feeling in itself that the amygdala produces in the body becomes another sort of stimulus that there's something wrong, there's something not right. And so that feeling itself stimulates the amygdala and kind of adds more information to the amygdala saying, hey, there's a potential problem here. And so what we end up with here is a sort of negative feedback loop where the more anxious we become, the more we kind of feel anxious, the more we're kind of thinking about how we're feeling anxious, and that's making us more anxious. And every time we focus on the anxiety, it gets hard, it gets more and more and more. And so we get this feedback loop that's going on. And that's why so often when people are in anxious states, things can spiral out of control and they can become very emotional because the system just eventually swamps all form of rational logical thought, and we all become just emotional beings. And that can be very problematic in many of the situations that you guys work within every day. And so part of the skill that we're going to try to teach you in a more general sense is to stop this feedback loop, to get in the way and prevent it from spiraling out of control. And the skill I'm going to eventually teach you to do that is to be able to relax your body, to be able to summon relaxation, the opposite of anxiety. But before we get to that skill, and before we can talk about that skill, there's a previous skill we have to talk about, which is even noticing that this is happening, that when we're starting to get this sort of anxiety spiral happening, we have to mentally take note of it. And I want to give you a kind of silly analogy to think about. And it's something you don't remember very well, but if you have children, you may kind of identify with them going through this. One of the things children have to learn is not to wet their bed at night. And what they really need to learn in order to do that is the feelings within their body that happen just before they have to wet the bed, right? And eventually, what they can learn is to identify those feelings. And when they start to feel those feelings in their body, then they can do something about it, right? They can wake up then and go use the washroom, and then the feelings go away and everything's fine. That's almost the same analogy I want to give you. There are feelings in your body that anxiety produces, and we have to learn, just like the child does, that those feelings are predicting or telling us about a state our body is in that we should be responding to. And if we learn to kind of feel those feelings and think about them that way, then that's the critical first step towards intervening and dealing with those feelings. And so that's what we're going to focus on in this video, is that learning the mindfulness that tells us that we are in an anxious state. Okay, so again, I'm eventually going to go through these 3 steps. Notice whether your body or mind, or both typically, are in an anxious state. And then when you realize they are, learn how to relax, to bring yourself down, and also learn how to actively listen to bring other people to that calm state with you. So we're just right here. And we will come back to this slide in our subsequent videos to kind of connect with it and keep us in mind where we are. Okay, so the skill of checking into one's body and mind on a regular basis. Here's the jelly beans. Okay, it doesn't have to be jelly beans, but whatever you may have around, peanuts, jelly beans, chips, something you like to drink, a coffee maybe, whatever you might have around. Here's what I would ask you to do. I would ask you to, get some of that around you. So if you have to pause for a second, go get something, and then come on back. Okay. Cool. Hopefully you're back. Excellent. And now what I'd like you to do, first of all, just while I'm talking, is just eat or drink that as you normally would. And yeah, just have a sip, have a chew, have a whatever. When we normally eat or drink something, we actually don't pay a whole lot of attention to the sensations that that's producing. So many of the sensations the world kind of gives us just kind of flow right by us without us really paying a whole lot of attention to them. Now, every now and then, of course, if you think of somebody like a wine connoisseur who's like drinking a wine and really paying attention to the flavor, that's kind of where we want to get to. So what I'd like you to do now is to once again eat or drink whatever it is that you have, but to do it in a very mindful way. So when it's in your mouth, feel the texture of that food. It probably has a flavor of some sort. That flavor could have some sweetness to it. It could have some bitterness to it. It could have some saltiness to it. Note those sort of flavors. Like, what does it actually taste like? What does it feel like when if you're chewing that thing? What's the texture when you chew? When you swallow, how does it feel when it goes down your throat? Okay? All of those things, you can suddenly tune into it with your mind. Your mind can pay attention to these things you normally just ignore and let go by. And that's generally what we call mindfulness. Learning to attend to things that we normally just ignore. Now, what I want you to become mindful of course, is the feeling of anxiety, and in our next video, the feeling of relaxation. But let's focus on the feeling of anxiety now. Now, I've told you a lot about what the anxiety system does, right? It basically energizes your entire body and gets it ready to fight or flee. It also, by the way, drains blood from the frontal lobe that makes concentration kind of difficult, and makes it hard to think through things. So what I really want to tell you now is think of these things like the jelly bean, in a sense. Learn to kind of tune in to your body or your mind. Now, it could be your mind as well, right? Our mind as well has thoughts that flow through it all the time, and quite often we don't really spend some time thinking about what we're thinking about, as odd as that sounds. We have these thoughts that are sort of semi-conscious and semi-going through our mind, and quite often these thoughts either have a positive kind of connotation, or when we are stressed and anxious, they almost always have a negative connotation going on. They are worries, they are fears, they are anxieties. And so either of these things you can become mindful of. You can actually sort of, close your eyes right now and check in with your body, and how does it feel? Does it feel like you're kind of energized, like your muscles are kind of taut, and that you feel like you really wish you were doing something, that you could get out there and do something? That's the feeling of anxiety. And when you check in with your mind, what is actually on your mind? Is it are they positive thoughts, or are they stressful kind of negative thoughts? And so what I really want you to learn is to tune into the fact that every now and then your body is anxious and you might not even sense it. You might think you're a little moody today, or maybe those around you think you're a little moody today. That's the fight or flee reflex, right? You're right on the edge of fight. And so learning those sort of signals, if other people are reacting to you like you're moody, check in. What's going on in my mind right now? What's going on in my body? Am I stressed out? Do I feel that level of tension? That's going to be a first step. So the first step to control the stress response is to recognize it. I'm going to bring Yoda back every now and then. I decided. Every time I'm trying to give you some sort of Yoda-like story, I will bring Yoda back and have him do it for me. And so yes, this is the first step. Tuning into the fact and learning to recognize stress. It's a simple step. In words, it's simple. This is all about developing the habits and the skills. And so, in order to develop the habits or skills, you have to continually practice this skill. You have to practice trying to recognize the stress response. And so that brings me to my homework for this one. And yes, there will be occasional homework. The first thing, just to kind of enjoy mindfulness, because mindfulness can be very cool when you have positive things happening. If you finally get a chance to relax and have that snack you want, or even watch that sports game, or whatever it is you enjoy, having a something to sip on at the end of a long day of work, whatever. When you're in that situation, think back to this video, and when you're sipping on that beer or eating that potato chip, or whatever it might be, drinking that wine, take some time and enjoy it. Really kind of put your mind towards what that tastes like, and how that feels. Maybe a cool drink on a warm day feels really nice just in terms of the sort of temperature differences. Just kind of play with mindfulness and realize that there are a lot of great things in your life that you're probably not appreciating as much as you could. And so just that alone can help your mental health to kind of learn to appreciate the good things in your life. And it is giving you exercise with the mindfulness. Okay, so that's mindfulness in general. But now for some very specific mindfulness training around anxiety, here's what I would like you to do. Using your smartphone, set a few alarms for the day, just at various times throughout the day. I mean, I really wish there was an app that could just randomly ping you every now and then during the day. Maybe there is. I should go check that out. But you can set alarms, certainly with your phone, and then just go through your day. But what I want you to do is, when that alarm goes off, to try as much as you can at that moment. Obviously you have to turn the alarm off, which is a little annoying, but at that moment to do a mental check-in and to say, well, what was I just thinking before that happened? What was the character of the thoughts in my mind, and how is my body feeling right now? Do I feel tense or do I feel relaxed? And so you can use these as regular check-in times. It's hard to do this by habit at first, and so we use the technology to kind of help us learn the habit of checking in on ourselves. I also want you, while you're doing this, to note the relationship between what you were thinking and doing and how you feel. So if you check in with yourself and you notice, hey, I am feeling kind of anxious, what was happening just before? What's the context that you're in? Maybe you want to recognize this context as one that makes you anxious. And then going into this in the future, you can say, oh, this is a context where I was anxious before. I should be checking in and seeing if I'm anxious now. Okay? So for example, maybe you just watch the news and now you're feeling anxious while you're learning. The news is making me anxious. Maybe you just did karaoke with your kids and you feel great. So learn that, hey, when I'm feeling anxious, here's an activity I can do that seems to make me feel good. And there are a lot of activities like that, by the way. Music in general is very good. Aerobic exercise tends to make us feel better. Lots of those sort of things. So start to learn those connections between the world around you, the situations you're in, and the feelings inside your body and inside your mind. And as you're doing this, you're becoming a much more mindful consumer of the world. You are really learning how the world makes you feel. And that's going to be important in those situations where, if it's making you feel a way you don't like, well, now we're going to be able to do something about it. But again, first it's about just learning to tune in. And the next video I'll talk to you about what we do when we do feel that anxiety is present. Okay, so off to your homework. I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.